You have 24 hours to remove that creek or we'll escalate this to legal action. That's what she said, with an actual finger point for emphasis. The smugness practically steamed off her breathless little grin. She handed me the letter like it was a royal decree and not something she clearly printed off her home office inkjet. This wasn't just a neighbor squabble. No, this was the start of something much darker. The kind of thing that begins with a petty citation and ends with someone sobbing on the 10 o'clock news next to a destroyed koi pond and a trench full of concrete. And it all started with a trickle. Literally. Where are you watching from? A townhouse? A cul-de-sac? Maybe you're lucky enough not to have an HOA breathing down your neck. But let me ask you something. Have you ever had peace, like true, soul-deep peace, and watched someone systematically try to destroy it just because they could? That's what happened to me. 3 weeks earlier, it was just a normal Saturday. The sun was soft, the kind of light that makes everything look like it's filtered through warm honey. I was sitting on the back porch sipping coffee, listening to the water from the creek my grandfather built himself, stone by stone, 70 years ago. It's not big, not flashy, maybe 15 feet long, winding past the edge of my property down toward the easement, a few lily pads, some koi. The kind of thing that feels like the world forgot it ruined it. Until Karen moved in. Now, she didn't buy a house, she conquered one. Blonde bob, athleisure queen, SUV with a personalized plate that said V1Z1. She was president of the HOA before she even closed escrow. Literally, there was a rushed vote at the emergency board meeting the same week the for sale sign came down. One of those silent coups you only hear about when you dig through the meeting minutes no one reads. For the first month, I thought she'd just be one of those people. You know the type, lemon wedges in the bird baths, measuring grass with a ruler, writing emails about curb harmony. But she escalated faster than I could have predicted, and apparently my creek, my family's creek, disrupted her backyard feng shui. At first, it was passive. She'd walk by and linger a beat too long, ask weirdly pointed questions like, "Do you know if that's considered natural or decorative water?" Or, "Is that stocked? I thought exotic fish were banned under Section 4. I just smile, nod, say the koi came with the house. So did the water. But the tone shifted when she started calling it a drainage ditch. She said it like a curse word. That ditch is pooling mosquitoes. The ditch is eroding common land. The ditch is causing a seepage issue on Lot 7. Except none of that was true. I checked, rechecked, cross-checked with the original plat map from the county records. The creek predates the HOA. My lot is grandfathered in. Hell, the damn thing is mapped. It even has a reference number from the Public Works Department. But none of that mattered when the first notice came in. A single-page letter, no return address, but with the HOA header in bold. It cited me for unauthorized landscape water feature and non-compliant filtration, a $250 fine, due immediately. I brought it to the board meeting that month, public comment section, read the bylaws aloud, line by line, quoted the grandfather clause, and pointed out the easement line clearly excludes my property. Even offered the board members copies of the original survey, the one with the creek noted in blue ink. But Karen just sat there, silent, smiling, the kind of smile that isn't friendly, it's rehearsed. When I finished, she leaned into the mic and said, "Thank you for your passion. The board will take your comments under advisement." The next morning, a second letter arrived. This time the envelope had my name in all caps, and it was hand-delivered from Karen herself. "You call that a creek?" she said, holding it out. "It's a drainage ditch, and it violates Section 6.4b. Section 6.4b doesn't apply to grandfathered structures, I said, not even taking the envelope. "Then you won't mind showing me a permit for that pump system." She tilted her head like she was about to bless me. It took everything I had not to laugh. The pump she was talking about? It was a solar bubbler, less water pressure than a garden fountain. But she was fishing, looking for anything that could give her grounds to escalate. And she escalated, she did. That week, I got 3 more citations, one for unauthorized water discharge without HOA approval, one for unauthorized exterior lighting, because apparently my solar garden lights now counted as visual obstruction, and a final warning: failure to remove the unpermitted water feature within 10 days would result in escalation to legal recourse. But I wasn't backing down. I spent that night going full conspiracy board, printed every citation, highlighted contradictions, dug up every municipal and HOA document I could find, online and from the city clerk's office, found an environmental zoning clause that mentioned legacy water structures, found a 1992 letter from the original developer confirming the creek was part of the aesthetic draw of the parcel, even found an archived real estate listing from 2003 bragging about the koi stream as a unique backyard amenity. I packaged it all in a neat binder and sent it certified mail to the HOA board. Each page tabbed, labeled, and referenced. I even included a copy for Karen. The next day, she doubled down. She came to my house mid-afternoon with a landscaper. Didn't ring the bell, just walked right into the backyard and started pointing at things. "This is where it's leaking," she said, gesturing to nothing. The landscaper looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, this is not a typical drainage. It's a liability. If a child fell in, the HOA would be responsible." I finally stepped outside. "You're trespassing," I said, calm, quiet. "This is HOA business," she said, waving her clipboard, "and you've left us no choice." That's when she handed me the final letter. Official HOA seal, threat of a lien if I didn't resolve the unapproved structure within 24 hours. And here's the kicker. It was signed by Karen and the HOA's attorney, a guy she just so happened to be dating. That's when I knew this wasn't about bylaws or safety or drainage. This was about power. Because if she could take down the creek, a documented, legally installed, historic structure, she could take down anything. Your shed, your mailbox color, your garden gnome. Nothing would be safe. But I wasn't going to roll over. I had a plan. Not revenge, not yet, just leverage. I looked her in the eye, took the letter, and said, "Okay, you want a legal escalation? Let's escalate." You will not believe what she tried next. The cement wasn't just wet, it was fresh, still steaming slightly in the morning sun, like a scar that hadn't healed yet. My lilies were half buried in it, crushed flat under a gray skin of concrete that hadn't been there the day before. I stared at it for a full minute, frozen, before I spoke. "Why the hell is there cement in my flower bed?" Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a crime scene that was technically still legal? That's what it felt like. Like something had been destroyed, violated, but there was no chalk outline, no sirens, no one coming to stop it. Just me, a trowel, and the sinking realization that my backyard was under attack. It's easy to write off HOA drama as petty, and it usually is. A fence half an inch too tall, a mailbox that's the wrong shade of beige. But this wasn't that. This was sabotage. And sabotage, when done quietly, is damn near invisible until it's too late. Let me rewind to 3 days before the cement. After Karen dropped off the so-called final notice, I did what any reasonable person would do. I lawyered up. Not a big-time guy, just a friend of a friend who owed me a favor. He confirmed what I already suspected. The HOA didn't have the authority to touch the creek, not unless it caused actual damage, which it didn't. No flooding, no sinkholes, no runoff issues, nothing measurable. But Karen didn't care about measurable. She cared about visible. And in her HOA president brain, if something didn't match her Pinterest board aesthetic, it needed to be removed. That weekend, I noticed the water in the creek wasn't running right. It was sluggish, almost like it was choking. I checked the pump, still humming. Then I checked the flow upstream, normal. It wasn't until I followed the water all the way down to the bend behind the weeping willow that I noticed it, a weird ridge of gray under the surface. At first, I thought it was just sediment, maybe clay or runoff from the last rain, but when I reached in and scraped at it with a stick, I hit resistance, hard resistance. concrete. Now at this point, I still gave the benefit of the doubt. Maybe a neighbor was doing patio work. Maybe some washout during the rain. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't deliberate. Then came Monday morning. I was standing in the kitchen sipping coffee when I heard the rumble, that low, grinding sound of wheels too heavy for residential asphalt. I stepped outside and saw him, Karen's landscaper, slowly reversing down my driveway in a small concrete mixer. No apology, no explanation, just a smirk, one of those "oops, I didn't see you there" expressions that made my blood run cold. I stepped into the path of the truck. "Are you lost?" I asked, arms crossed. "Nope," he said, not even pretending to check GPS. "You're trespassing." He shrugged. "Karen said I could back through to get better access to the south fence line." "I don't own this driveway." He didn't say anything, just looked past me like I wasn't there. Then he shifted into reverse and slowly started backing out, leaving behind a faint trail of gray dust on my asphalt like breadcrumbs. I called the HOA that afternoon. Of course, no one answered. Left a voicemail, emailed the board, then filed a complaint with the city's code enforcement line, just for good measure. By Tuesday, the water had stopped moving entirely. The koi were still alive, barely, huddled at the shallow end like confused survivors of a shipwreck. When I reached into the creek, this time near the midsection, I found not just a patch, but a wall of cement, poured directly into the channel. I dug into it with a flathead screwdriver and pulled out a piece, still damp in the middle, meaning it was poured recently, meaning someone had trespassed onto my property, or worse, snuck onto it and actively blocked my waterway. You don't need to be a lawyer to know what that means. Malicious destruction of property, environmental interference, unauthorized construction. I started documenting everything: photos, time-stamped videos, even samples of the water. That night, I waited until the neighborhood got quiet. Then I walked along the fence line between my lot and Karen's. I wasn't trespassing, just observing. And what I found was enlightening. A hose, thick, industrial grade, running from her side yard toward the back of the property line. And near the end of it, a stained wheelbarrow half-caked in cement residue. I snapped photos, took a short video, then walked back, heart pounding harder than it should have been. Because I knew what I was looking at wasn't just spite. It was covert, calculated, the kind of thing people plan when they think no one's watching. The next morning, I filed a police report, not because I thought they'd come storming in with handcuffs, but because I wanted a record, something time-stamped, official, and tied to her name. Then I did something else, something a little sneakier. See, most HOA presidents rely on control, the illusion of absolute authority, but they also rely on something else, plausible deniability. Karen knew better than to touch the creek herself, which is why she used the landscaper. But what she didn't count on was that he wasn't as loyal as she thought. I called him, posed as someone needing landscaping services. We talked for 20 minutes. He bragged about his regular client in Briarwood Glen and how she paid him very well to do little extras. I recorded the whole thing. He never explicitly said the word cement, but he mentioned patching water issues and closing up runoff features. More than enough to build a pattern, especially with photos, timestamps, and that convenient trail of tire dust down my driveway. You starting to see the web here? By Thursday, my backyard looked like a war zone. The lilies were ruined, the fish were stressed, the entire creek bed was bone dry, like the soul had been sucked out of it. And then came the letter. Slipped under my door this time, no envelope, just one printed page with the HOA header and the words, "Due to failure to comply with water feature removal, the HOA is considering professional remediation at homeowner's expense. Final review to occur at next board meeting." Remediation, that was the word they used. Not repair, not inspection, remediation, which in Karen speak meant we're about to pour cement into your heritage creek and charge you for the pleasure.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the garage flipping through every document I had, looking for the flaw in her plan. And somewhere around 3:25 a.m., I found it. One buried clause, paragraph 8, subsection 12, under HOA construction guidelines. No external alterations to natural landscape features permitted without municipal survey and board vote, minimum 30 days notice. Guess who never filed a survey? I smiled. For the first time in days, I really smiled. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to stop her. Not yet. Because sometimes the best trap is the one you let your enemy build for themselves. So I let her think she was winning. The koi were moved, quietly, safely, to a backup tank in my garage. The creek bed, let it dry. Let it look abandoned. Because the more obvious her interference became, the easier it would be to prove intent. And when the next rain came, oh, and it would come, the water wouldn't flow the way it used to. The question is, where would it go now, and what exactly was buried beneath her backyard fence?
If that's runoff, then I'm a mermaid. That's what I said, out loud, crouched behind Karen's side fence with my phone flashlight angled just right, illuminating the rusted mouth of a cut-off pipe, gurgling stormwater straight through her flower beds. The hydrangeas above were a decoy. Below, an active crime scene. You want to talk about irony? She tried to concrete my creek, and the whole time, she had a bootleg drainage operation flowing like a back-alley car wash under her begonias. This wasn't petty anymore. This wasn't about koi fish or fountains or unauthorized natural sounds. This was infrastructure tampering, municipal level, possibly federal depending on where that stormwater was supposed to go. But before we get into the dirt, and I do mean dirt, let me back up a few days. Right after I filed the police report for the cement, things got quiet. Not peaceful, just tense. Like that silence before a tornado, where everything feels too still, like the wind is holding its breath. Karen stopped showing up at board meetings. She skipped her daily jog stroll past my house. But the HOA, it kicked into overdrive. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, I got an email. New violation. Day 1, lawn not uniformly edged. Day 2, non-compliant hose color. Apparently, green hoses don't match community palette guidelines. Day 3 was the one that broke me. Reflective clay scales may pose a visual hazard during peak sunlight hours. Please consider alternate fish species. I wish I were kidding. They were trying to wear me down, flood me with so much bureaucracy I'd give up and drain the creek myself. But they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I once fought a roofing contractor for 6 months over a flashing detail. I have patience. And worse, I have time. So instead of retaliating, I watched. Every evening, I'd sit on my back porch with a notebook and a set of binoculars. At first, it was just routine surveillance, documenting the landscaper schedules, HOA board visits, Karen's comings and goings. But then, one evening, I noticed something off. It had rained 2 days earlier, not a flood, just a slow, soaking storm. Normally, the creek would have gently swelled and spilled out into the runoff swell at the edge of the property. But this time, nothing. The water had backed up strangely, puddling near my fence line. My side was dry. Karen's side looked like a bog. That's when I remembered something. Back when I first moved in, the old HOA president, a grumpy Vietnam vet named Wallace, told me about an old stormwater line that used to run through the common land, something the developer buried back in the 90s, way before modern code enforcement caught up. That pipe was supposed to be discommissioned, redirected. According to the city planning apps, it had been sealed and capped. But what if someone uncapped it? It was a long shot, but it gnawed at me. So I pulled out the big tools, a shovel, a pry bar, and a ground-penetrating rod I borrowed from a friend in utility surveying.
If you've never done backyard detective work, let me tell you, nothing feels weirder than poking holes in the earth around your HOA president's hydrangeas at midnight with a flashlight in your teeth. And yet, that's exactly what I did. The first 2 nights, I found nothing. Clay, gravel, maybe some old irrigation lines. But on night 3, just behind her privacy lattice, I hit metal. I scraped away the dirt layer by layer until I saw it. A corroded pipe elbow, jaggedly cut, poorly sealed with what looked like spray foam insulation, the kind of lazy DIY hack job you'd expect from someone who thinks Pinterest is a permit. I flipped on my phone camera. The pipe was wet, dripping, and not just water. I caught a faint smell. Not sewage, but old runoff, mildew maybe, fertilizer. I traced the pipe about 6 feet, crouched behind her fence, and found its outlet, tucked beneath the retaining wall on the border of HOA common land. She'd rerouted the water, illegally, through HOA property, without a permit, without a board vote, and definitely without city approval. You will not believe what she told me when I confronted her. It was the next day. I waited for her to get the mail. I walked out casually, waved, and said, "Hey, Karen, I noticed you've got some drainage issues on your side. Saw a pipe out there. Any idea what that is?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, that? It's just natural runoff from the slope." "Slope runoff doesn't come out of a pipe," I said. She smiled that same condescending HOA smile, all gums and fake zen, and replied, "Well, water finds its own way." Yeah, right. Into the board's liability fund if someone slipped. I dropped it in that moment, but she knew. She saw it in my eyes. I had her. That night, I emailed the city's Environmental Code Enforcement Division. Attached photos, coordinates, even screenshots of the HOA land plat showing her unauthorized pipe was breaching. I CC'd the HOA board. Not just Karen, everyone. The response came the next day. A formal notice of investigation. Scheduled inspection for the following week. I could practically hear her wine glass shatter through the walls. But here's the twist. When the inspector showed up, the pipe was gone. Dug up, replaced with a patch of fresh mulch and a sad-looking rhododendron that hadn't been there 2 days ago. She thought she could erase it, just like she tried to with my creek. But what she didn't know was this. I had a backup video. A full walkthrough, time-stamped, geotagged, narrated, and uploaded to a private Google Drive folder shared with the inspector. And when he saw it, he didn't say much, just nodded slowly and said, "That's going to be a problem." You see, rerouting stormwater without a municipal permit is bad enough, but rerouting it through HOA property? That's a double violation. It puts the board on the hook for remediation. And if they didn't know, that's negligence. If they did know, that's conspiracy. The walls were closing in, and Karen knew it. The next HOA meeting? Oh, it was glorious. Tension so thick you could cut it with hedge trimmers. Karen showed up late, sweaty, no notes, no smug smirk. When the inspector read his findings, violations of city drainage code, environmental concerns, and potential water table contamination, you could see the board shift, doubt creeping in like mold under a deck. Karen tried to spin it, said the pipe must have been from the previous owner, that she never noticed it, that maybe a landscaper uncovered it accidentally. But the board wasn't buying it. One member, Greg, the treasurer, who had always been a silent vote, actually cleared his throat and asked, "So, who gave the landscaper access to common land?" Karen didn't answer. She just looked at me, because she knew. And the best part? This wasn't the end. Not even close. Because guess what happens when you illegally bury a pipe, tamper with HOA property, and then get caught trying to cover it up? You get audited. And Karen, she had a lot of other things buried deeper than just that pipe. Ever wonder what happens when a paper trail leads straight through someone's custom wine cellar and out the other side? Stick around. Things are about to crack wide open.
The scream echoed halfway down the street, shrill, wet, and full of the kind of panic that only happens when your feet hit cold water that shouldn't be there. I was standing on my porch with my morning coffee when I heard it, a high-pitched shriek followed by the unmistakable splash of something flopping against tile. Plop, plop. I didn't have to look. I already knew. Karen had koi in her basement. And not just water, not just damage, fish, orange and white ghosts from the creek she tried to bury. Poetic? Maybe. Intentional? Let's just say the universe has a sense of humor. But you have to understand, this didn't happen overnight. It was slow, deliberate, and it started weeks earlier with an old survey map, a stubborn water table, and the fact that I knew this neighborhood better than Karen ever would. Let's go back. After the storm pipe incident, Karen was scrambling. The city had opened a case, the board was shaken, but instead of backing off, she doubled down, started using procedural weapons, emergency HOA votes, proxy stacking, obscure bylaw interpretations. It was like watching a petty dictator rewrite the constitution of a cul-de-sac. One Thursday, I got a notice that my driveway gravel was non-uniform in aggregate size. I didn't even know that was a thing. The next week, my mailbox posed visual clutter due to an unauthorized seasonal wreath. For the record, it was a plain pine circle, no ribbons. But Karen was doing something else too. She was expanding her own land improvements. New irrigation system, retaining walls, a suspiciously fast-tracked sunroom addition that, according to the county database, didn't have any permits filed. And every time I drove past her property, I saw new sod, new landscaping, new diversions. That's when I remembered something my grandfather once told me while we built the original creek together. This land doesn't forget. You can build on it, but water remembers where it wants to go. The creek wasn't artificial. It followed the natural slope carved decades ago, a trickle path that collected water from 5 backyards and funneled it toward a swale at the far end of the HOA's common ground. Long before Karen's McMansion was built, it was the natural drain line. She hadn't just buried my creek, she'd choked the land's memory. And land, especially wetland, doesn't take kindly to being forgotten. I started studying the stormwater records, spent late nights scrolling through satellite photos, pulling parcel maps and watching topographic animations like they were war documentaries. And soon enough, a pattern emerged. Every time we had moderate rainfall, Karen's backyard would flood slightly. Not much, just soggy grass, pooling water under her hydrangeas. But after she rerouted the pipe and blocked the creek, the water had nowhere to go, except down, right toward her foundation. 3 weeks before the basement incident, I began nudging things, not breaking laws, just helping nature find its memory again. There were a few cracks in the cement Karen's landscaper had dumped into my creek. I knew the spots, brittle, poorly mixed sections where roots had started to push through. So I widened them. Little pressure washer here, a little pickaxe work after dark, quiet, surgical, like chipping at a dam with a teaspoon. Then I did something even better. I removed the temporary diverter I'd installed upstream to protect her property. The one I put in out of pure decency, back when I thought we were neighbors, not enemies. I let the natural runoff rejoin the slope. Just a little trickle at first. But I timed it, because the rain was coming. Not a biblical flood, not a hurricane, just a slow, steady 2-day soak, enough to test the terrain. And by now, I knew every inch of the slope, every angle, every low point. And I knew that Karen's new sunroom, built too close to the foundation without proper drainage, sat directly in the path of the old water line. I still remember the night before it happened. The rain was light, tapping against the gutters like fingers drumming on a table. The kind of rain that seeps into everything, silent, patient. I couldn't sleep. I got up around 3 a.m., put on boots, and walked the fence line. The sound was unmistakable, the gentle, rising trickle of water flowing where it hadn't flowed in weeks. It had returned, and it was heading straight for her. Now here's the best part. A month earlier, I had moved the surviving koi, the one she hadn't killed with cement, into a temporary pond in my garage. They were survivors, resilient, patient. And I had one final gift planned. I built a small temporary channel along the side of the fence, nothing permanent, just a discreet little path. The next morning, as the rain pooled and the runoff deepened, I opened the gate to the holding pond and let the koi swim home. Not to my creek, to hers, to the place that used to be their stream bed, the place that used to remember. That morning, I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching. When she opened her basement door and stepped down into ankle-deep cold water, the scream came fast, sharp, and then that wet slapping sound. Not just water, fish. Karen's fortress, her carefully curated HOA weaponized palace, had become a pond. She tried to blame me, of course, said I must have sabotaged her foundation, called an emergency HOA meeting to accuse me of deliberate hydrological interference, whatever that means. But remember that city investigation, the one from the illegal drainage pipe? Well, turns out they hadn't closed the file, and when the inspector came back to follow up, he saw the flooding. Took one look at her cracked retaining wall, the improper grading, and that convenient lack of sump pump, and said, "Ma'am, this looks like a natural drainage restoration issue." Natural. Restoration. Karen was fuming, said something about lawyers and property rights, but it was too late, because I hadn't forced anything. I had simply removed the obstacles she put in place. The koi remembered the stream, the land remembered the flow, and the HOA, well, they started remembering a lot too. Especially after Greg, remember Greg, the silent treasurer, brought up the unpermitted sunroom addition at the next board meeting, said something about liability, insurance exposure, possible code violations. Suddenly, the rest of the board wasn't so eager to co-sign Karen's vendettas. Karen's power was cracking, like the walls in her basement, and I was just getting started. Because if koi can find their way back home after weeks in a garage tank, what else might come swimming out of Karen's past?
So, let me get this straight. We owe $94,000 to repair Karen's basement, but she's the one who broke the law? The silence was a freight train. Crushed plastic cups and half-empty water bottles littered the boardroom table. I could feel every pair of eyes shift, tense on her. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. It was a full-blown soap opera with county codes and engineering reports. When I said that, the air in the room cracked like static electricity. The board members looked stunned. The treasurer's ink-smudged hands trembled over the stack of financial statements. Let me walk you through how we went from koi in the basement to what's now legally called a special assessment, or as the town gossip calls it, the special assessment from hell. You've likely heard of an HOA special assessment, a one-time fee imposed when the reserve fund won't cover emergency repairs, capital upgrades, or unexpected calamities. Bank rate, HOA Management Company, Charlotte, NC. Usually it's something manageable, a cracked gate, a roof leak. But in Karen's case, unpermitted modifications, illegal drainage, and flooding turned into a far more sinister situation. 3 days before the board meeting, I had an inspection done. Typical, right? Engineer, camera, clipboard. He spent 2 hours wandering the sunroom, the cracked foundation, creaky stairs. In the meeting room that morning, he cleared his throat and said, "These modifications were done without proper permitting, and the water intrusion is a direct result of rerouting the creek and obstructing stormwater flows." That's engineer speak for, you didn't just break bylaws, you broke the law. Heads turned toward Karen. Suddenly, I was the only one not sweating.
Let me rewind for the backstory. A week earlier, after the koi freed themselves and returned home, collective memory never fails, I got a quote from a civil engineering firm. They itemized remediation costs, foundation sealing, drainage regrading, new sump pump, soil compaction, all necessary to fix the flooding she caused. And surprise, surprise, none of it was covered by insurance since it was an unpermitted alteration and not an act of God. Total, $94,000. Split across the HOA's 50 homes, that's nearly $2,000 apiece, enough to make anyone choke on their latte. That morning's meeting was tense. I opened with the cold open line, mic drop move intended to shock. The room shifted. Karen went pale. She tried to argue that the flooding was natural settling, that it just happened. Classic, right? One board member, a no-nonsense former accountant, straightened and said, "Your basement is fighting for water that belongs to common property, ma'am. That's infrastructure-level damage." Cue the escalation. I produced the sealed engineer's report, tapped on the floor map showing how Karen's upgrades had diverted water directly into her foundation. I also submitted photos I had taken of her hydrangea pipe, the patchy concrete in my creek, the sumpless sunroom, dirt, diagrams, data. Another member, the legal advisor, cleared her throat. According to our CC&Rs, the board can levy a special assessment for unexpected repairs impacting common areas or multiple members. And because this stems from negligence or unauthorized construction, it falls squarely into compliance assessment territory, levied against the property that caused the damage. Heads turned back to Karen, and then to me. I nodded slowly. Then came the vote. It was silent, a long, agonizing second. Then, one by one, board members raised their hands in support. The special assessment passed, but not evenly. Since Karen's property was the singular cause, the board voted unanimously to assign 85% of the remediation costs to her lot, with the rest shared as a goodwill gesture. That's compliance assessment logic. Only the responsible party bears most of the cost. Spectrum AM.